Today has been a good day. I just saw my last patient and can't begin to describe how good it feels to have someone leave happy. Obviously, I can't tell you much about him, patient confidentiality and all that. All I can say is that as a GP, I've been fighting the council for months to get him a new place to live. He's an elderly fella who lives on his own. Widower. Filthy, bad chest. Lives in a 2-up 2-down on Balaclava Street. You know the ones, down at the bottom. Damn things should have been ripped down years ago. I mean, who knew there was a link between damp, cold houses and chronic respiratory illness? That, by the way, was a rhetorical question. You don't need a medical degree to work that one out. All right, let me put it another way. Why do we think it's all right in this day and age to let an old man, someone who served his country in a war, live in a house like that? It is the 1960s, for heaven's sake. Except this morning he picked up the keys to his new flat and couldn't wait to show them off to me. A job well done, I'd say. It was obvious to me that I'd never fix his chest unless I could do something about the damp in his house. And as I couldn't solve that, I had to get him moved. Sounds simple enough, but it's much harder in practice. On days like these, I appreciate being in a position to help. On days like these, I'm glad I switched codes, as my father put it. I should explain. 20 years ago, I'd had enough of being a doctor. I'd seen sights that will forever haunt me, and done things no man should ever have to endure. When I came home, I was dead set on never picking up a scalpel again. It was Mother who convinced me to switch codes, and I'm glad she did. By switching codes, I mean leaving behind surgery and entering the completely different world of general practice. Trouble was, my father. He's the reason I went into medicine in the first place. He and I are like two peas in a pod. Our relationship is more than father and son. As long as I can remember, we've also been friends. As a child, I idolised him. They definitely broke the mould when they created him. Professionally, he worked as a surgeon, one often described as eminent. When you think of a surgeon in the 30s, certain images come to mind. Grand, aloof, austere. But none of those things describe my father. For certain, he'd jump down your throat and chew you up if you crossed him, and he never suffered fools. But he's also one of the kindest, most compassionate people you'll ever meet. He was also an utterly devoted husband, father, and uncle. Both my parents were doctors. My mother was a GP, and in those days there weren't many women GPs. I think my mother's influence rubbed off on father, smoothing his abrasive edges and turning him into the man I knew. As a child, I was incredibly close to both of them, but more so to him. There was something about him that made me want to grow up and be just like him. The way I saw things was simple. Father was a doctor, so I had to be one too. He was a surgeon, so me too. You get the picture. However, in my drive to emulate him, I lost sight of who I was, and it took me a long time to realise. I'm a few years older than my two brothers, and that meant that I had time to bond with the old man. He and I used to do things together, just the two of us. It seemed to me that there was nothing he couldn't do. If I broke a toy, he mended it without fuss. If I fell and grazed my knee, which happened a lot, he was there to patch me up. He dominates my childhood. Most of my memories have him in them. And he's always laughing and joking. When he wasn't at the hospital, he would tinker about with one of his many projects, building or repairing something. Both my parents worked long hours, and yet they never missed an important school event for any of us. A nativity, a school play, or a cup tie. For one of our cousins, Elsie, he built a doll's house. That's the house and the furniture. I was 4 or 5 at the time and insisted on helping, which is to say that I hung around talking incessantly at him. He never once lost patience with it or me. 30 years later, and Elsie still has that house. It's her most treasured possession. Just last week I reminded Father about it. His memory is fading now, but his eyes lit up. I was more helpful when we restored an old jalopy. He'd explain in meticulous detail how everything under the bonnet worked. He had this thing about every part working in synchronicity with the others. If you tinker with one part over here, he'd say, it will have a knock-on effect somewhere else. I remember him putting down the wrench and whispering in my ear, "Whatever you're grappling with, son, always try to see the whole, not just the bit you're working on." Our parents threw regular dinner parties for the local good and great. We kids would be packed off to bed. From my room I'd listen to the hum of conversation and the gentle chink of crystal glass and the bursts of my mother's hyena-like laugh as they put the world to rights. I knew all was well when cigar smoke drifted up the stairs into my room. It felt comforting, safe. But I also knew it wasn't normal. We lived in a large country house in its own grounds with woodland and a river. We had oodles of space, and it was a magical place in which to run around. We had a huge lawn on which we'd get up a cricket match. Father taught us to fish in the river. My memories of childhood are all warm and sunny. It was perpetual summer. It was bliss. It was when we drove into town that I came to appreciate how different my life was compared with most other people. We'd go in the back of Father's car. Often we'd drive through some of the more run-down areas, but we never stopped in them. I'd gaze through the polished windows and see children playing in cobbled streets, in the shadow of run-down terraced cottages. I'd see the state of their clothes, all hand-me-downs, torn and patched up. Many of them had nothing on their feet, and if they did, their shoes were worn and coming apart. Even through young eyes, I knew something about it wasn't right. I asked Father why they were poor compared with us. "It's just the way things are," he'd sigh. Strangely, I was fascinated by them and longed to get out of the car to talk. I had so many questions, but there was never an opportunity. They stayed beyond the glass. The differences, as I saw them, weren't just their clothes and houses. To me, they looked nothing like the children I knocked around with at school. It seemed as though they came from a completely different country. But they didn't. They were just as English as me. The same as me, but at the same time, different. We weren't taught to look down on them, but it's hard not to feel grand when you're sitting comfortably in the back of a nice car, in fashionable clean clothes, wearing shoes polished for you by someone else. Looking back, I feel terrible about how I saw these people, but I put it down to childhood ignorance. It didn't last, and only a few short years later, I'd find myself no longer looking down my nose at these people. We became comrades, united in a common cause. Where once there was pity, now I was filled with awe and respect. I'll tell you about that next time, and I'll also tell you how my own life started to unravel.